Hey, welcome back on Sports Bit. Betting and Insight today, Paulie and Teddy. Thursday, October 27th. Big game breakdown, the doubleheader on TNT. Celtics and the Bulls. We also have the Clippers and the Blazers, and then it's hardcore college football. The marquee games will start with Clemson and Florida State, Nebraska, Whiskey, Washington, and Utah. Let's go from the top. The Cubbies even up the World Series at 1. Game 3 will be Friday night in Chicago. Didn't have a lot of confidence in the guy. Second half, he was terrible. Arrieta was dealing, Teddy, and they hold the Indians to 1 run. Good job by the Cubs bullpen, and a solid start for Arrieta.
Yeah, I mean, the only run came on a wild pitch. There were no RBIs for Cleveland last night, and they're hitting woes from the Toronto series. Thought maybe they got some of that out of the way in Game 1. Obviously, reared its ugly head again in Game 2. But, I thought the Cubs were going to bust the game open in the third. And Javi, who's been amazing in the postseason, kind of had a weak at-bat, which hasn't generally been the case for him. But it didn't matter. That great at-bat by Rizzo in the 5th when he worked out the walk. And then Zobrist with the triple. That was ball game. It was over at 3-0 with a runner on third in the 5th inning. And for Cleveland, you had to win. You certainly had to win Game 1. I think you probably had to win Game 2 in order to make this series competitive. I'm not convinced this series goes longer. It might go to 6. I don't think it goes to a Game 7 now. I'm
going to be that guy. If baseball wants to get the younger demographic, they got to change a lot of things. 5-1 and a 4-hour game. Jesus, that is horrible. All right, we watched NBA all night. What were some of your takeaways?
Well, let's start with what the markets did, because you definitely want to be aware of what the markets are looking at very early in the season. And what we saw last night was betting market support, the syndicates, basically betting every underdog, except for the Sixers, the Kings, and the Lakers. And, of course, they ended up being profitable with the underdogs. The underdogs they didn't bet ended up being profitable. But, the Heat took money. The Mavs took money. The Pistons took money. The Nets took money. The T-Wolves took a ton of money. They were plus 2.5 at the opener before they closed the favorite. Charlotte took money. They opened plus 1 or pick them before closing as chalk. Denver took money. All of them significant moves of a point of a point or more. Minnesota the biggest of the bunch. And, of course, with all of those moves, what we have, Paulie? We had the first bad beats of the season.
Oh, the Mavs pace, you could see it coming. It was nip and tuck the entire fourth quarter. It goes to overtime, and then the Pacers get the money. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, and there was a foul right at the end because, who was it? Dallas hit a 3 to cut the lead to 6, and they fouled once, and they split the 2 free throws, going to land on 7, and then Quincy Acey fouled 1 last time.
Yeah.
Although the line was there 6.5, there were some 7s out there. It closed 5.5. The biggest lead after the 9-minute mark of the fourth quarter, 4 points. You just hate losing those in OT when you had the right side dog.
Yeah, you had the money too, and Harrison Barnes hit that 3 to put it in overtime or they were going to lose. Another horrible beat. The Celtics were up 23 in the fourth quarter against the Nets, and they fell apart.
Oh, the Nets cut it. They were up 23 in the fourth. The Nets cut it to 120 to 117 and had not won. They had 2 looks at the game, tying 3. Brooklyn, crazy to sound, I think you're going to make money betting on Brooklyn. There's going to be some wild swings of the dice. That team went 15 of 44 from three-point land on opening night, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to jack up threes. The nights where they're hitting, they're going to pull off some upsets. And if they get hot down the stretch like they did last night, the team that just about everybody has right at the bottom of the NBA, right there with Philly and LA, I think, if they get hot in the fourth quarter like they did, they're going to cover some numbers.
And a lot of money on the Timberwolves. People are high on the Wolves and they can make the playoffs. And Tibbs comes in. They open the game on a 20-3 run and they lose.
Yeah, the lead was gone by the end of the first quarter. They opened 20-3. The lead was 3 points by the end of 1. They did lead with under 2 minutes to go. They lost by 4 and failed to cover.
Some bad bets. Miami-Orlando under, bet from 203 down to 199, lands 204. There was some shenanigans in that game, Teddy, because that was a blowout, and they kept fouling.
Yeah, oops.
Yep.
The Heat are going to run this year, and we saw that. I was surprised to see all the under money last night, but for a team that's going to run, Whiteside's defensive presence means that they're going to protect the rim, so they're not a dead nuts over team. I think that's what the markets were reacting to. But as you mentioned, the game was competitive into the or the game was non-competitive in the final minute, and yet we saw a whole bunch of points scored that sent it up and over the number.
76ers were fired up. Hey, they're finally trying. They actually want to win these games. The crowd was into it. OKC, they were sleepwalking through the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, OKC, they took money, they were bet up, and they didn't lead ever by as many points as they had to cover. OKC, a bad bet last night.
All right, big game breakdown. Let's sneak it in here in the first segment. The doubleheader on TNT. Game number 1, Celtics and the Bulls. Celtics are 1.5 on the road, 210.5 the total. Stevens and the Celtics finally land a big-time free agent. They get Horford. Great fit with Brad Stevens. They're going to score a ton of points, but you saw it in the Brooklyn game, Teddy. Who is the go-to guy in crunch time for the Celtics?
And they don't know. Last year was Isaiah Thomas. And, he could well be that guy again this year. Horford could be the guy as well. But for Boston, they're a team that right now is definitely in the process of developing roles. Those are not assigned roles yet, which made me reluctant to lay points with the Celtics last night. It makes me reluctant to back them here. They have those offensive end game issues that may well rear their head a few times before Brad Stevens figures it out. Stevens loves the versatile players, the guys that can fit at multiple positions. Boston has that, but you say bad for a team on the second night of back-to-backs. I often think that in the first game of the season, it's an advantage to having a game under your belt, not a disadvantage, even if it was the previous night. Maybe
the Bulls have too many go-to guys. Rondo wants his shots. Wade, you have Butler. That's not a good thing, not a good fit. And this might be the worst shooting backcourt in the NBA with Wade and Rondo.
Yeah, two guys that can't hit threes, but that's not where they're going to get their threes from. They're going to get threes from McDermott. I know the wise guys seem to hate Chicago. Everyone that I know, that I talk to, that is that is an analytics-minded person says this lineup's not going to work. It's the wrong coach. It's the wrong players. They're old. They're silly. It's a mismatch. Let me put it this way. I understand the thought process, but there's a lot of talent on that team. I don't think the Bulls are necessarily going to be as bad as some of the wise guys think.
I don't like Hoiberg at all. All right, game number 2. Clippers against Portland. LA on the road, 209 the total. The rematch of the first-round playoff game. Doesn't get any better than CP3 against Lillard. And Lillard was sensational in that first game against Utah. 39, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. And you're going back to that edge. One team's already played. Clippers opening the season. What kind of Blake Griffin are we going to get, Teddy? He was awesome until he got injured and then was suspended.
Well, it's a different scenario for the Blazers with the playing their second game compared to the Celtics. Celtics are on the second night of back-to-backs. And in general, first set of back-to-backs, I love betting against teams. So it's kind of a wash for Boston. It's not a wash for Portland. It's an advantage to having played once already. But you asked about what kind of Blake Griffin we're going to see. This is a guy who spent last year injured and suspended. They got KO'd in the playoffs by this team. They had to go the final 2 games without Griffin. Competed hard, but couldn't get there. What kind of Griffin are we going to see? Here's a quote from Doc Rivers. He's just more determined. I think Blake's always been determined, though. He's a great human being, a very, very good human being. Sounds like Trump right here. He didn't want what happened last year, and it's a great example that 1 minute can change things. It did for Blake. The positive is that he went through a tough time and came out of it. I think he missed the game. I think that happens to players. They take it for granted sometimes. You can see his love for the game more, for sure, and he already loved it. I just think when you miss like that, you really appreciate your teammates. You appreciate the game. LA coming into the season with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I expect them to have it right from game 1 tonight.
Great night in sports. 6 football games in the doubleheader on TNT. Up next, big game breakdown. 4 marquee college football games. We'll start with Clemson and Florida State. Coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
All right, back on SportsBit. Time for big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. The marquee game Saturday night, Clemson hits the road to take on Florida State. Clemson's 4.5, 60 the total. It's only the second time Jimbo Fisher's a home dog. The only other time was 2011. Clemson won a grinder last year, 23-13. They gave up a 75-yard touchdown on the first play and then won a physical, grueling game. Now, I know you don't like this, and let me give you credit because you made the comparison earlier the year that this Clemson team reminds you of last year's Ohio State team.
Well, yeah. Clemson is a team that wasn't concerned about margin, that clearly had a bunch of guys coming back who had thoughts about going to the NFL, And the chemistry hasn't been there the same way for Clemson this year as it's been last year. There's a difference between this year's Clemson team and last year's Ohio State team, though. A couple of differences. One is that last year's Ohio State team, there were different factions when it came to quarterbacks, and this year, no issues with the quarterback. It's Deshaun Watson, and he's the guy, and that's what it is. The second issue, maybe, is that Clemson's been really lucky so far. Ohio State, yeah, maybe they were lucky for a while, but that was a really good team. Clemson, yeah, the talking heads are saying, oh, they know how to win. Does knowing how to win mean you automatically jinx the opposing field goal kicker so he misses 3 field goals, including the potential game winner from chip shot range against NC State? No, that's luck. What about the ending against Louisville? Again, not a right side. They were lucky in that contest. So I worry about Clemson covering numbers. They haven't been a very good favorite so far this season, and some of that may have to be maybe with that comparison with Ohio State last year, a team that's reading the press clippings a little bit too much.
Florida State's going to win this game. They have to convert touchdowns in the red zone. It's been the bugaboo so far. The bye week could have helped them. Remember, Francois won the job late in camp, so maybe they can put more into the playbook and help them out. But, Teddy, these red zone issues are ridiculous for Florida State.
Well, especially in the first half. I mean, it's been all about slow starts at Florida State. 33 first-half drives this season against Power 5 opponents. In those 33 first-half drives, the Seminoles have scored touchdowns on a grand total of 4 of them. That's a whopping touchdown rate of 12%. That's not going to cut it. You don't want to be playing against Clemson from behind, especially from multiple scores behind. Florida State has to put the biscuit in the basket, and they have to do it in the first half of this ballgame. Look at the quote from Jimbo Fisher. You want to finish drive, which we usually did pretty good around here over the years early in the game. We've just got to relax and make the plays. Just let the plays come to you and don't overpressure yourself or try to do too much. Just play the play. When you have a quarterback who's a freshman, didn't have the starting quarterback until the very end of fall camp, yeah, that 2 weeks may matter. Of course, there is a lot of pressure on him. It's not so easy to relax when you're going up against a Clemson defense that, let's be honest, they've reloaded. They're sneaky good.
Yeah. What do you think? You got a lean total side?
I could only take the home dog in that game.
Okay.
I don't want the road favorite.
Wow. All right. Game number 2. LiveOddsSportsBookReview.com. West Virginia at Oklahoma State in Stillwater. West Virginia 3.5, 65 the total. Huge game here, especially for the Big 12. You take out West Virginia and Baylor, and they hope they're undefeated when they meet in December. Everyone else in the Big 12 has 2 losses. So West Virginia trying to move into the playoff hunt here, and they're doing it with defense under Tony Gibson. They hold their first 3 Big 12 opponents far below what the side total projections were at kickoff. You look at this graphic, staggering. Here's the markets in the scoreboard. K-State, team total 26.5. They held them to 16. Texas Tech, 39.5. Held them to 17. And TCU last week, off the bye, where Gary Patterson was 13-0. 30 was the team total. They held them to 10 points. Gibson doing an incredible job with the Mountaineers.
Yeah, and remember, we read the quote on the show last week or 2 weeks ago where Holgorsen was basically saying, our defense is the defense that makes me uncomfortable. It's the one that I don't want to face. None of the other Big 12 teams seem to want to face it very much either. But let's talk about West Virginia in the playoff hunt. I mean, how real is it? 12-0. They do have non-conference wins over an SEC team in Missouri and a BYU team that certainly has a strong strength of schedule. They're not maybe the best non-conference wins, but that's enough if they finish out the season undefeated. But you're right, the Big 12 is dying for a undefeated game with West Virginia and Baylor, both sitting at 11-0. They'd be 11-0 at that time. That matchup is December 3rd, which, it happens to be the same day as all the other Power 5 conferences have their championship games. Could there be a de facto Big 12 title game? There could. Obviously, a long way to go between here and there, and all the other Big 12 teams have a pair of losses. Holgorsen. I have to go right here. Holgorsen. What we do defensively is hard for me to attack in practice. That's why we do what we do. It's good against the spread. Gibby does a great job getting those guys motivated and playing hard. That's the key, being able to adjust in disguise and get lined up quick against all these up-tempo offenses.
Now with Oklahoma State, and Gundy likes to go up-tempo. They run that crazy Big 12 offense. They haven't been able to protect Rudolph. That's a big problem. 121st in the nation in sacks allowed. Come on.
Yeah, more than 3 per game, 3 1/3 per game. Mike Gundy, quote, we're concerned about protecting him. every week, and they should be. I mean, Mason Rudolph, he came in as a really highly ranked prospect. I don't think he's gotten that much better in his 3 years at Oklahoma State. I do not look him as an NFL guy. If he is, he's the Brandon Whedon of the NFL, Oklahoma State's last QB to make it to the next level. I'm not in love with them, but boy, this team does have some skill position talent. What they don't have is a great defense. I mean, that Oklahoma State defense is physical, and Kansas State had a chance to beat West Virginia with that physical play before missing a field goal on the final drive. That Okie State, yeah, they're physical, but I've seen them get torched on the ground. I've seen them get torched through the air. West Virginia can do both pretty darn well.
I want Okie State in this spot. I want the home dog. They've done well over the years in this spot. Remember, they knocked off Baylor a couple years ago, too. Same situation.
No, I wanted the home dog. We talked about Florida State. I do not want the home dog in this one. Again, we're talking about the only elite defense in the conference, a defense that's not getting a ton of market respect. And let's not forget, the markets are likely to knee-jerk towards the home dog. We've already seen some Oklahoma State money. It's quite routine to see anti-road favorite money for the remaining undefeated teams as the season progresses. In my opinion, there's a big difference in defensive class between these two teams. And this is the typical 8-4, 7-5 type Oklahoma State team. This West Virginia team, they're better this year. They really are.
All right, we agree to disagree on that one. Up next, Nebraska and Wisconsin and Washington and Utah. And we are red hot with the play of the day. That's coming up as well on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Big game breakdown continues. Live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Another big game at night. Nebraska hits the road to take on Wisconsin. Badgers 8.5, 43.5 the total. The Wisconsin D has allowed 8 touchdowns in 7 games, despite playing one of the toughest schedules in the country. But now they lose their leading tackler, Jack Sitchie. Nice kid, I've interviewed him before. He's out for the season. Now what do they do, Teddy?
Well, I mean, this is from linebacker Vince Beagle. Quote, "There were times where Jack actually threw himself into the quarterback with one arm. As a competitor, it really speaks on the character he is not to let an injury like this drag him down and bring him down. I knew after the game when he couldn't lift his shoulder that he was pretty badly injured. Luckily, he was still in good spirits after the game. His energy wasn't returned one bit. We're really going to need Jack's spirit going forward the rest of the season because he is a special guy. He will be missed for that Badgers defense. And as always in college football, when it comes to defensive injuries, the betting markets don't pay a whole lot of attention."
Yep. What do you think of this Nebraska team? And it seems like Armstrong's been there for 10 years.
Yeah, he's been the starting quarterback since late in his freshman year. And it's a pretty amazing career run for a guy who's never been anything special. I mean, he's okay. Even this year as a senior, 55% completions. His accuracy has just never developed. He does have a veteran's competitive savvy, far beyond the experience level of either Wisconsin quarterback. And Armstrong, look, serviceable, not elite. Not even close.
Yep. Isn't this line high?
Well, at first glance, it definitely seems like, if you think about it, here's Nebraska, an undefeated top 10 team catching more than a touchdown against a 2-loss foe. And I've heard people around town in Vegas this week say, "Hey, this game smells like a trap. What's going on? It smells like a trap." No, it's not a trap. The books know how high many syndicates have the Badgers power rated. Remember, last week, Wisconsin, -3.5 on the road at Iowa. They took money and then they won and covered. You know you're not going to get a whole lot of bargains with Wisconsin moving forward. And trap, no trap, whatever it is, this line is where it's supposed to be based on power ratings, not based on anything that you want to call a trap.
Yeah, and we're not impressed with Corey Clement. Go ahead and throw that graphic up there, fellas. He's tentative. He's lost his burst. Look at this. 2013, attempts and yards per carry, 8.2. 2014, yards per carry, 6.5. Last year, 4.6. This year, 142 attempts, 142 carries, 4.3 yards per carry. That includes 35 carries, a career high at Iowa last week.
Well, that's just it. Clement, everyone's talking Clement. He had a career high last week. He's never had more than 147 carries in a season before. And I'm telling you, he looked really tentative and slow last week. I worry about Corey Clement moving forward. I don't look him as one of the elite backs. He's someone that got the hype and may not be that good. Kind of like Samaj, who had a great freshman year at Oklahoma and is now the second best back on his team.
Last game, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Washington hits the road to take on Utah. Huskies 10, 51.5 the total. We talked about it on Monday's show, Teddy. Williams was unbelievable. Player of the week, Joe Williams, 300 yards rushing in the win at UCLA.
It wasn't 300. It was 29 carries for 333 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. He had touchdown runs of 64, 55, and 43 yards. And it was kind of a special game because he had retired, quote, 2 games into the season. Knowing how my body's been these past couple months, where I'm at mentally and physically, I'm not at the point where I can compete at the level I need to for the team and everybody. I feel as though this is the right decision. I'm going to miss it, of course. These guys are my family, and I love these boys to death, but it's for the best interest. That's what he said 2 games into the season when he quit. But Utah had injuries to 3 different running backs. So the players, the coaches asked him to come back. And what did he do last week? He was the best player in college football with a monster season. Now, one of the reasons he retired is that he's 23 years old and wanted to get on with his life. Now at 23, he's a big guy. He can be a power runner down the stretch against much younger defensive players.
I was very disappointed in Utah's defense last week. What do you think of the physical play here, and what do you think of Utah as a team if they can hang in this one?
Well, I mean, the whole thing with Utah, they have mediocre quarterback play. Defensively and in the trenches, Utah didn't play a great game last week by any stretch of the imagination against UCLA's backup quarterback. But it's not a weak defense. And in the trenches, they're one of the few teams that really can bang with the Huskies in the trenches. Remember, they won 34-23 at +3 underdogs at Washington last year. 34-23, I thought they won, I don't know what the score, but they were, Washington was -3 at home last year. They lost the game by double digits. And I'm telling you, I remember the game well. The Huskies have a physical edge in the trenches against just about everybody else. I don't know that they have one here.
All right, so lead us right into it. Money time, the play of the day. 16-5 run with the play of the day. 24-10-1 on the football season. Betting number 200. You know what we're going to do? Take it away, Teddy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know we love Jake Browning and all that. 1,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, 2 picks, number 2 in the nation in passing efficiency. But look at who he's put it up against. Washington strength of schedule. Weak, weaker, and weakest. They played Rutgers, Idaho, Portland State, Arizona with a backup quarterback, a game that went to overtime. Arizona's beat Grambling and Hawaii this year. That's it. They beat a lousy Stanford team. They beat a lousy Oregon team and a really lousy Oregon State team. That's it for Washington. They step up in class here. I think they get tested. Game number 200, Utah, plus the 10. That's our play of the day.
All right, very good. Fast-paced show. The association is here. Friday's going to be crazy. We'll recap everything tomorrow. Again, 6 football games. And you got the doubleheader on TNT. We're back with the NFL previews on Friday's show. Weekend preview. Tell your friends. Thanks for watching. SportsBit, betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.